Hey guys, it's Layla from Ignite, and in today's video I'm going to take you through some key points on context behind George Orwell's 1984. But before I get into that, please do like and subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. And if you're wanting resources to help you in your year ahead as a HSC student, check out our website at Ignite HSC. But for now, let's get into today's video. So what you can expect to see in today's clip are some insights to the context behind Orwell's 1984. Now, if you're a student studying the text, you'll note that the text is inextricably linked to its context, and there are a multiplicity of ideas that relate to it, being post-war, being the wake of the Cold War, giving rise to communism around this time is also an issue. You've had the rise of fascism, seen in figures like Hitler and Stalin, and we've also seen the rise of totalitarianism. Now that last point on totalitarianism is going to serve as the focus for what I discuss, but in the clip I've actually tried to tie in some really nice quotes and extracts from critical essays dealing with the context from Orwell. So I'm going to show you those, but obviously as a starting point, the ideas I've mentioned, the fact that we're coming out of fascism of Hitler in World War II, the wake of the Cold War and the silent arms race, moving into the era and the rise of communism, looking at figures like Hitler and Stalin, and thinking about Orwell's conceptions of democratic socialism. Those 5 points are ideas that you guys can take from this video, do your own research and consider how they might relate to the issues you want to raise in your body paragraphs when you're writing on text and human experiences. But in today's clip, I'm going to, like I said, take out a couple of little critical extracts, discuss the nature of totalitarianism, and show you how they link to an actual quote from the text from the ending as well. So broad in one way, intricate in the fact that I've given you some critical insights, but I've also signaled towards other ideas that I think you should research in your own time when you're developing an understanding of what really lies behind Orwell's thoughts when he was curating 1984. So I wanted to start with this nice extract here. 1984 is misread, if not read in the context of its time, right? So again, that nexus between context and what happens in the text is immediately established. Around 1948, a post-war world brutally and arbitrarily divided into spheres of influence by the great powers. And that point itself can be related to the fact that we've got the East Asia, Eurasia and Oceania. Those 3 spheres of power are indicative of that happened in Orwell's context itself. The atom bomb exploded, so a fear of technology and its capability is also central to the context. And the fictive London of Winston Smith, a recognisable caricature. A caricature is a very obvious characterisation picking up on stereotypes of the actual post-war London that Orwell had walked and that this author can vividly remember. And I like this extract because it signals for us as students of the text the relationship between the context and indeed the form that Orwell embodies. The text, yes, is dystopian in parts, but it is also a highly realist text. And the realism comes from the text's very vivid reflection of the time in which it was written. So note that key aspect of genre, satirical, realist, but in some elements dystopian, speaks very directly to the context in which the text was written. So there's a nice little introductory extract. I also think it's worth noting that the concept of 1984 as a title, as opposed to having 1984, connects to this idea of the realism of the text. Now, when Orwell gave the title of the text, 1984, it actually wasn't the only title he had in mind. The original title he had given the text, if I'm not mistaken, was The Last Man Standing in Europe. And I thought that title or that fact behind the text was quite interesting because it showcases that the text was very much directly speaking to the premise of the time and that Winston was the last man standing in Europe following the atrocities that had just occurred. But I think the issue with that title was that it limited the access or the audience of the text to Europeans, and that's something that Orwell didn't want. He wanted a broader readership and an audience for his text. But 1984 and the italicization there of the concept signals that 1984 is not a year, it's a process, a moment in time that builds on the germinal elements of Orwell's own world, and they manifest and develop in the future. So he's signaling here that it's not a particular year he's warning against, but rather a type of political and social system that could feature at any point in the future as a concept. The totalitarianism, the ubiquitous control, the surveillance, the inherent removal of human connection, these are all characteristics of a world termed conceptually as 1984 as opposed to a particular point in time. And I think that relates to both the contextual elements that underpin the text and the realist elements, because the text isn't only pinpointing that year in the future, but is indeed showcasing how elements of its own world can manifest to develop a concept of political systems in the future. But most importantly, the text is certainly satirizing totalitarianism. Now, to satirize something is to take elements of it and to reflect it in the text, to show a mirror up to society, a mirror of those features of totalitarianism, and to present them in the text, reflecting what was happening in the world at the time. But what is totalitarianism, right? It's power for the sake of power. And I like this little extract here. This is a quote from Orwell, and he's responding to a blurb that had been written about the text. And what I love is in the latter part that I've highlighted, how he frames what the text is essentially referring to in terms of its context. So these little quotes I'm giving you, these critical interpretations, these notes from Winston, or sorry, not from Winston, from Orwell himself, are able to be integrated in your essay to enhance your understanding of how context is indeed dictating the nature of human experiences that are depicted in the text. So it makes the book sound as though it were a thriller mixed up with a love story. So this is not what he wants. It's not a thriller and a love story. And I didn't intend it to be primarily that. What it is really meant to do is to discuss the implications of dividing the world up into zones of influence. I thought of it in 1944 as a result of the Tehran Conference, and in addition by parody something is quite similar to satirizing it, right, to take out the elements and to exaggerate them in the reflection, the intellectual implications of totalitarianism. So he's saying that I'm taking those elements of my own context and I'm creating a parody of them, those totalitarian features, in the way that the text has been written. Totalitarianism is seen in figures such as Hitler and Stalin, right? Hitler's fascism, his desire to wipe out a race, power for the sake of power, and seeing a very clear hierarchy between those who gain the power, right, Big Brother, and those who have no hope to fight against him. Now, the infallibility of power is also central to Orwell's critique of totalitarianism that featured in his context. Now, what I mean by that is when we look at the journey of Winston's rebellion, we know it's doomed from its opening phases, from the outset. Big Brother's control and his surveillance is so omnipresent, so ubiquitous, that there is no real possibility of escaping it. And I wanted to segue then into my final slide from a quote from the ending to showcase how Orwell's realist and satirical commentary on totalitarianism in his context really drives to the fore of the ending. So let's take a look. So it reads, 2 gin-scented tears trickled down the sides of his nose, but he was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. And ending with that sense of submission to Big Brother certainly reinforces the dangers of totalitarianism, in the sense that the lone submissive individual has no hope but to submit, given the ubiquitous, infallible nature of totalitarian control. Okay guys, I hope that you found these disparate ideas useful. You've got the critical insight to the inherent connection between the context of Orwell and what he conveys in the text. I've signaled some ideas that you guys can look up and develop in your own time in terms of gaining a deeper understanding of the nature of World War II, Stalin and Hitler, the rise of fascism, Cold War, and the rise of communism. So do some more research into that, and that will deepen your understanding of a lot of the contextual allusions that Orwell makes in the text, which also heightened the realist elements of the text construction. Moving forward, make sure you're considering how these elements of context implicate the human experiences that are depicted in the text, and that you acknowledge that relationship in your essays. If you have any questions, guys, please do place them below and I will get back to you. And please do like and subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications so you're notified when new content is coming your way. And if you are wanting some resources to really help you navigate your way through the year ahead, check out our website at Ignite HSC. We've got loads of notes on prescribed text, including notes on context, form, pages and pages of close analysis and exemplar essays curated by state ranking students and heads of English across New South Wales. So check us out, you won't regret it. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I do hope to see you guys in the next video.